No one in the room knew that the most humiliating moment of Ethan Cole's life would become the spark that destroyed an empire. It began with laughter. Expensive, hollow laughter that echoed through the chandeliered ballroom of the Sterling Grand Hotel. Guests in diamonds and designer suits raised their glasses under gold-tinted light. Cameras flashed. Deals whispered. Reputations flaunted. And in the center of it all, the Sterling family, the self-proclaimed royalty of the city's business elite. Victor Sterling, the patriarch, stood tall with his trademark grin and his silver hair slicked back like a crown. His son, Ryan, was a mirror of arrogance in a tailored tuxedo, and beside them their daughter, Claire, watched the crowd with the cold precision of someone used to being admired. Their empire, Sterling Dynamics, had been built on power, manipulation, and a talent for crushing competition. At the edge of the ballroom, Ethan balanced a tray of champagne flutes, keeping his expression calm as he navigated through the glittering crowd. Every smile he offered went unseen. Every step was measured, precise. To anyone watching, he was just another waiter, but he wasn't. Inside that rented tuxedo was the future CEO of Horizon Systems, the tech company whose quantum processor was about to redefine global computing. Ethan wasn't serving drinks because he needed the money. He was there because he wanted to understand the people who wanted to own him, the Sterlings. When Ryan Sterling turned toward him, smirking with the lazy confidence of wealth, the crowd followed his gaze. "You missed a spot," Ryan said, tipping his champagne flute forward. A slow crimson stream poured down Ethan's chest. The liquid soaked his shirt, dripping onto the marble floor. The room fell silent for half a second, then erupted in laughter. Phones lifted. Flashes popped. Gasps became chuckles. "Someone call the rental company," Ryan called out, pretending to laugh too hard to breathe. "This waiter's defective." Ethan froze. Every instinct screamed to react, to defend himself, but he didn't. Not yet. Victor Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He folded it neatly and slid it into Ethan's pocket. Then he patted his cheek twice. Firm, deliberate. "There's your tip," Victor said softly. "Next time, remember your place." The laughter returned. Louder this time. Crueler. But what no one in that ballroom realized, what not even Victor Sterling could have imagined, was that Ethan Cole wasn't a waiter at all. He was the man who, in less than 24 hours, would decide whether the Sterling Empire survived or vanished. And at that moment, as red wine cooled against his skin, Ethan wasn't angry. He was calculating. He didn't need to make a scene. He would make history instead. 2 hours earlier, before humiliation turned to prophecy, Ethan had stood before his apartment mirror, adjusting the bow tie on his rented tuxedo. His reflection looked sharp, but his eyes betrayed the pressure of expectation. This was his first major appearance representing Horizon Systems since his promotion. His father, Daniel Cole, had founded the company from a garage and built it into a global powerhouse. But tonight was Ethan's moment, the first time he'd walk into a room not as Daniel's son, but as Horizon's next leader. His phone buzzed. Dad appeared on the screen. "Remember," his father said when Ethan answered, "the Sterlings don't respect potential. They respect power. But power without integrity means nothing." Ethan nodded silently. "Your decision, son. The partnership is yours to approve," Daniel continued, his tone calm but heavy with meaning. When the call ended, Ethan looked back at his reflection. His father had refused to raise him in wealth's illusion. No inherited trust funds, no golden shortcuts. Every position Ethan held, he earned. He had spent years in labs, coding prototypes, sleeping under his desk, testing circuits until sunrise. Now he was the chief architect behind Horizon's new processor, a breakthrough that could make or break entire industries. And tonight, the Sterlings wanted it. At the gala, Ethan stepped through the glass doors into a sea of glittering arrogance. Gold chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Violinists played soft melodies above the hum of social politics. He spotted the Sterlings instantly. Their confidence radiated like heat. They didn't just attend galas. They owned them. As Ethan approached to introduce himself, a security guard blocked his path. "Staff entrance is around back," the man said flatly. Ethan produced his invitation. The guard looked confused but moved aside, muttering an apology. The damage, though, was done. A few nearby guests whispered, Ryan Sterling smirked. New money, Victor said under his breath, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. Standards really have fallen. Ethan forced a polite nod and stepped away. The room seemed to swallow him whole, yet he didn't leave. He observed. He listened. He saw how Ryan berated a waiter for serving champagne too warm, how Claire made a mock apology after tripping a busboy, how Victor charmed investors with jokes about crushing competitors. They were predators dressed in refinement, and tomorrow morning, those same predators would sit across from Ethan at a boardroom table, unaware they'd already lost. As the night moved toward the charity auction, Ethan took a seat in the back, quietly watching. The auctioneer, all smile and stage polish, waved his gavel as the crowd shouted bids for luxury getaways and designer items. Then came a modest item, a weekend at a countryside vineyard. Ethan raised his hand. 500, Ryan turned. 5,000, he countered smoothly. Ethan smiled faintly. 5,500. Ryan lifted his glass, eyes gleaming. 50,000. Some people should know their limits. The crowd laughed again. The auctioneer hesitated only briefly before hammering the gavel. Sold unto Mr. Sterling. Ryan raised his glass in triumph. Ethan raised nothing at all, because the next item wasn't just an auction piece. It was destiny. The screen lit up with the logo of Horizon Systems. Next, the first commercial partnership rights for Horizon's quantum processor. The air changed. Conversation stopped. Cameras pointed. Victor Sterling rose slowly. 1 million, he said, locking eyes with Ethan. The challenge was unmistakable. Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from his father. Trust your judgment. Remember who you are? Ethan's lips curved slightly. I'll remember, he whispered. What no one knew, not yet, was that by the next sunset, every person in that ballroom would remember him too. And the Sterling name would be history. The laughter in the ballroom had faded, but its echo clung to Ethan's memory like a stain that refused to wash away. He drove home in silence. The city lights slid across the windshield, painting streaks of gold and red across his face. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. What burned inside him wasn't fury. It was clarity. He had seen the Sterlings for who they were, and now he knew exactly what to do. By the time he reached his apartment, midnight had painted the skyline in deep blue. He hung his ruined tuxedo jacket over a chair, poured himself a glass of water, and sat by the window overlooking the city. His reflection in the glass stared back, calm, deliberate, and dangerous in a quiet way. He picked up his phone. Leah, he said when his assistant answered, her voice groggy with exhaustion. I need full reports on Sterling Dynamics. Labor practices, environmental violations, financial statements, lawsuits, everything you can find. Sir, it's almost 1 a.m, she murmured. I know, Ethan said softly. We have a meeting with them at 9. I want the truth before then. Leah hesitated, then sighed. I'll get the team on it. Thank you. He ended the call. For a moment he closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of the city pulse around him. Then he opened his laptop. Within minutes his screen filled with data, old reports, hidden lawsuits, and whispers buried beneath corporate polish. It was all there, the unpaid workers in their factories overseas, the bribes disguised as consulting fees, the silenced employees who had tried to speak up. Every file was another crack in the Sterling empire. At 2 a.m, he called his father. Daniel's voice came through calm but sharp. I assume the gala didn't go well. They showed me who they are, Ethan said. Then believe them. Ethan nodded, though his father couldn't see it. I already do. Do what's right, Daniel said simply. You have my full support. When the call ended, Ethan felt a strange peace settle over him. It wasn't vengeance. It was justice waiting for sunrise. He spent the next few hours crafting what would become the most consequential meeting of his career. 2 contracts, one that looked generous and another that would quietly dismantle the Sterling dynasty if they signed it. By dawn, exhaustion tugged at his eyes, but his focus only sharpened. The city began to stir, taxis honking, coffee shops opening, the hum of life returning. Ethan closed his laptop, showered, and dressed in a charcoal suit that wasn't rented this time. It was tailored, crisp, commanding. The air of Horizon Systems didn't need to hide anymore. When he stepped into Horizon's headquarters at sunrise, the staff looked up in surprise. No one expected him so early. He offered no explanation. He didn't need to. In the boardroom, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan placed 2 folders at the head of the table, each perfectly aligned. One was marked partnership, the other contingency. By the time the executive team arrived, the tension in the room was already thick. "Are we really meeting with the Sterlings today?" one of the VPs asked. "Yes," Ethan replied evenly. "And by the end of that meeting, they'll wish we weren't." The team exchanged wary looks but said nothing more. They trusted him, not because of his name, but because of how he led. At precisely 8:45, Ethan's phone buzzed. Security had called from downstairs. "Mr. Cole, the Sterlings have arrived. 3 SUVs, full entourage. They want to be brought up immediately." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let them wait in reception for 14 minutes. The security guard chuckled softly. "Yes, sir." Downstairs, the Sterling family strutted into Horizon's lobby like they owned the building. Victor's cane clicked against the marble floor. Ryan was glued to his phone, showing his father a photo from last night. Ethan, drenched in wine, humiliated. It had already gone viral on gossip sites. "Perfect," Victor said. "By noon, we'll own his company." Claire leaned close, whispering, "He's probably too ashamed to even show up." Ryan laughed. "He'll be lucky if he still works here by the end of the day." The receptionist met their arrogance with practiced politeness. "Mr. Cole will see you shortly." "Of course he will," Victor said, smirking. "He knows who signs his checks." When the elevator doors finally opened, they stepped in with the confidence of predators walking into familiar territory. But upstairs, the atmosphere was entirely different. Ethan stood waiting by the glass wall, city skyline behind him like a silent witness. His suit was immaculate, his gaze unflinching. The moment the doors opened, the laughter stopped. Recognition dawned. Ryan's grin faltered first. Claire froze. Victor's jaw tightened. Ethan turned toward them with a calm, unreadable smile. "Good morning. I believe we've already met." For the first time, Victor Sterling didn't have a comeback. The silence stretched until Victor forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Ah, what a misunderstanding last night. You should have told us who you were." "Why?" Ethan replied evenly. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" Victor's face twitched. "We had no idea you were the CEO's son." Ethan finished. "Or the man you came to negotiate with." The air turned heavy. Ryan lowered his phone. Claire's practiced charm evaporated. "Shall we begin?" Ethan said. They took their seats, unsure whether to speak or apologize. Victor tried to regain his composure. "You know, Ethan, humility is a rare trait in this business. You handled yourself admirably." Ethan gave no reaction. He turned to his assistant. "Please bring the proposal." Leah entered with the 2 folders and placed them in front of Victor. "One outlines standard partnership terms," Ethan said. "The other reflects an alternate structure based on our findings about Sterling dynamics." "Findings?" Victor asked, his smile tightening. Ethan tapped the folder gently. "Labor exploitation, environmental negligence, fraudulent accounting." Victor's color drained. "Baseless accusations." "I thought you might say that," Ethan replied. "That's why we verified every document." Ryan leaned forward, voice sharp. "You think you can threaten us?" Ethan looked at him calmly. "I don't need to threaten you, Ryan. The truth does that for me." The room fell into thick silence again. Victor tried to salvage control. "These are standard industry practices. Costs of competition." Ethan studied him for a moment. "That's exactly why we won't partner with you." Then he slid the second folder across the table. "This is our final offer." Victor scanned the document, his composure cracking line by line. "This gives you oversight of our internal operations. Mandatory ethics training. Executive restructuring. You expect us to sign this?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I expect you to walk away. Because this meeting isn't about partnership. It's about consequence." Ryan's hands clenched into fists. "You're destroying a billion-dollar company over a spilled drink." Ethan's eyes didn't waver. "No, I'm choosing not to empower people who've shown me how they abuse power." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire's eyes glistened, caught between anger and fear. Victor's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his cane. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded bill, the same one Victor had slipped to him the night before. He placed it gently on the table. "I believe this belongs to you." Then he straightened, his voice calm but final. "The meeting is over." No one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the city below. As the Sterling sat in stunned silence, Ethan turned toward the window, his reflection merging with the skyline. "Some debts," he said softly, "can't be repaid in money." Downstairs, financial reporters were already gathering. None of them knew yet that the next press conference would rewrite the future of an entire industry, and by sunset, the Sterling empire would begin to crumble. The Sterlings left the boardroom in silence. Their once confident steps sounded small against the marble floor. Cameras were waiting in the lobby, but none of them smiled now. Victor's driver opened the car door, yet he hesitated before stepping in, eyes lost in a storm of disbelief. Ryan muttered curses under his breath. Claire just stared out the window as the building shrank behind them. None of them spoke on the ride home. Every second of silence felt heavier than the last. Back upstairs, Ethan stood alone in the conference room, hands resting on the table where their contracts still lay. The $100 bill sat between the folders, the ink glinting faintly in the sunlight. He took one slow breath, then called his assistant. "Leah," he said, "prepare a press announcement. Joint partnerships with the 3 companies we finalized last quarter. Make sure it's public by noon." "Yes, sir." "What should we tell the Sterlings?" "Nothing," Ethan said. "The truth will tell them everything they need to know." He stepped out of the boardroom and into his office. His phone vibrated again, a call from Tokyo. His father's voice came through steady. "How did it go?" "They fell on their own," Ethan replied. "That's usually how it happens," Daniel said. "You don't need to push a tower made of glass. Just let the light hit it." Ethan allowed himself a faint smile. "The announcement goes live in 2 hours. Then it's done," his father said quietly. "Let the world watch." By the time the press conference began, the world was indeed watching. Financial journalists filled Horizon's New York lobby while live feeds linked to Daniel's office in Tokyo. Screens behind them displayed the Horizon logo pulsing softly. Ethan took his place before the microphones. His expression was calm, his tone even. "Today marks a new chapter in technology," he began. "We are proud to announce exclusive development partnerships with Avalon Group, RIA Systems, and Fujicore. Together, we will pioneer the next era of computing, responsibly." He paused, letting the word settle. Responsibly. Everyone knew what it meant. He continued. "We also introduce a new initiative, one built on ethics, transparency, and respect. Because progress means nothing if it costs people their dignity." Reporters scribbled furiously. Questions flew. But Ethan's answers stayed measured, focused. He never mentioned the Sterlings by name. He didn't need to. Their absence said everything. Across the city in Sterling Tower, chaos bloomed. Victor slammed his glass onto his desk, whiskey splashing across expensive paperwork. "Turn on the television," he barked. Ryan obeyed. The screen flickered to life. Ethan's face filled the broadcast, the Horizon logo bright behind him. As the announcement rolled out, Victor's expression hardened into disbelief, then panic. "No," he whispered. He wouldn't. But Ethan already had. Analysts on live television were reacting in real time. This move effectively cut Sterling Dynamics out of the future of processor technology, one explained. Without Horizon's architecture, their entire product pipeline collapses. Another analyst was less diplomatic. "Sterling Dynamics just got locked out of the next decade." Victor sank back into his chair, face pale. Claire was scrolling through her phone, reading headlines as they multiplied by the minute. "Ethical tech revolution begins. Horizon announces new partnerships. Leave Sterling in the cold." The spilled drink that shattered a dynasty. Ryan threw his phone across the room. "He's destroying us over one night." Victor shot him a glare. "He's not destroying us. He's exposing us." By mid-morning, Sterling's stock began to tremble. By noon, it started to fall. Investors demanded explanations. Board members called nonstop. Every lie they had told over the years was now surfacing under bright light. At Horizon, Ethan's team updated him every hour. The numbers rose. New partners, new investors, global praise for the ethics initiative. Yet he didn't smile. When Leah entered his office with the latest report, she looked hesitant. "Sir, Sterling's stock has dropped 20% in 3 hours." Ethan studied the page silently. It's not about the numbers, he said finally. It's about what those numbers represent. What do they represent? She asked quietly. Consequence. In the Sterling mansion, the atmosphere was poisonous. Reporters were camped outside the gates. Inside, Victor paced, phone pressed to his ear as he tried to reach allies who suddenly stopped taking his calls. Claire sat at the grand piano, fingers hovering over the keys without pressing a note. They're calling it the fall of the Sterlings, she whispered. Ryan was at the bar pouring another drink. They're exaggerating. We'll survive this. Victor turned sharply. Survive? We've already lost control of half our shares. Claire looked at her father, her voice trembling. Maybe they're not exaggerating. Victor's phone buzzed again, his lawyer. The words that followed drained what little color remained in his face. They're filing shareholder lawsuits, he muttered. Misrepresentation, negligence, it's starting. Ryan slammed his glass down. This is insane. It's justice, Claire said softly. Her brothers turned to her, startled by her tone. But she said nothing more. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Photos from the gala, the wine spill, the laughter, the humiliation, spread like wildfire. But now the captions had changed. Humility versus arrogance. The real story behind the Horizon partnership. The waiter who outsmarted the billionaire's power doesn't protect. You from Karma, every news outlet told the same tale. Not of business deals, but of human values. Ethan became the symbol of restraint, of quiet strength, of character. By the time the markets closed, Sterling Dynamics had lost 40% of its value. The company that once dominated industries was collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. As dusk fell, Ethan stood once again by his office window, watching the city lights flicker alive. His phone buzzed and another call from Tokyo. His father's voice was calm as always. You've changed more than a company today. Ethan looked out across the skyline. I didn't mean to destroy them. I know, Daniel said. You meant to protect something worth more. What's that? Your name, your integrity, and the future that deserves both. Ethan nodded. The city glowed below him, unaware that its balance of power had just shifted. In the darkened office of Sterling Tower, Victor sat alone, staring at a single object on his desk, the $100 bill. The one he'd given to Ethan in mockery. He picked it up, turned it over, and for the first time in his life, it felt heavy. The laughter he once commanded now sounded like ghosts echoing in an empty room. And far above him, the future he thought he owned was being rewritten without him. The morning after the collapse began, the headlines hit harder than any lawsuit. Every news channel opened with the same words. Sterling Empire crumbles after ethics scandal. Victor Sterling sat at the edge of his bed, still in last night's suit, watching reporters dismantle everything he'd spent his life building. He barely noticed the phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. The board was calling. Investors were calling. But what could he possibly say? That a young man they'd mocked had undone them without lifting his voice. Claire entered the room quietly. She looked nothing like the woman who used to walk through crowds with diamond confidence. Her face was pale, eyes red from sleeplessness. Dad, she said softly, they've called an emergency meeting. They want answers. Victor rubbed his forehead, the lines on his face deepened overnight. There are no answers, only excuses. Ryan stormed into the room, phone in hand, face flushed. They're leaking old emails, he snapped. The labor violations, the safety cover-ups, who gave them this? Victor looked up slowly. The truth doesn't need permission to surface. Ryan's voice cracked. We can fix this. We can spin it. We just need control of the story again. Claire's voice was quieter, steadier. The story isn't ours anymore. Outside their mansion gates, the world they had once owned was turning on them. News vans lined the street. Former employees stood beyond the fences, some holding signs, some just watching, waiting for the family who had once controlled their futures to step outside. Meanwhile, inside Horizon's headquarters, Ethan sat in the same boardroom where it had all begun. Reports covered the table. Media analyses, investor updates, public reactions. Leah stood beside him, reading through the numbers. Horizon's market cap increased by $8 billion overnight, she said. We've received over 100 partnership requests since the announcement. Ethan nodded but didn't smile. And the ethics initiative? 73 companies have signed on so far. More are asking for meetings next week. He leaned back in his chair. Then it's working, Leah hesitated. Sterling Dynamics shares are in freefall. They've lost over 60% of their value. Ethan looked out the window. They built their wealth on broken backs. Sometimes the market only reflects what's already true. She studied him for a moment. Do you feel vindicated? No, he said quietly. I feel responsible. As the day went on, the fall accelerated. Internal memos leaked to the press. Instructions from Victor to pressure staff until they break. Financial documents revealed falsified environmental reports. A former executive came forward on live television, voice shaking as she spoke of the culture of intimidation. By sunset, Sterling Dynamics had become a global symbol of corruption. At their headquarters downtown, the board gathered for the emergency meeting Claire had warned about. The conference room, once a place of luxury and control, felt more like a courtroom. Every board member sat stiff and grim. Victor entered with his children, trying to project the same confidence he had always carried. But the illusion was gone. The chair of the board, an old friend turned accuser, didn't even stand to greet him. We've lost 68% of our market value, she said coldly. Partners are pulling out. Lawsuits are piling up. We need immediate leadership change, Victor laughed bitterly. You think removing me will fix this? You think the world will forget? We think it's the only chance the company has to survive at all. Ryan slammed his hands on the table. This is ridiculous. You're letting that boy destroy us. Another board member spoke sharply. He didn't destroy you, Ryan. You did that yourselves. Documents were passed down the table. Legal reports. Shareholder votes, signatures. The decision is unanimous, the chair said. Effective immediately, the Sterling family is removed from all leadership positions. For a long moment, no one moved. Victor's eyes darted from one familiar face to another, searching for a hint of loyalty. None remained. When he finally rose from his chair, his voice was barely a whisper. I built this company. The chair met his gaze. And you built it wrong. The vote was over in minutes. The Sterlings walked out of the room stripped of everything but their name. And even that had lost its shine. In the lobby, a television showed live coverage of Ethan speaking at the grand opening of a New Horizon research center. He stood before a crowd of engineers, students, and journalists, saying only one line that the entire world would remember. We build technology to elevate humanity, not exploit it. Victor stared at the screen, unmoving. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the building into a swarm of reporters. Flashbulbs erupted. Questions flew. Mr. Sterling, is it true your board has removed you? Do you regret your treatment of Ethan Cole? Was the wine incident real? Victor tried to push through the crowd, but in the chaos, a cameraman stumbled in front of him. For the first time in his life, Victor Sterling lost his temper in public. He shoved the man hard. The flash went off mid-motion, capturing the perfect image, the final symbol of a man consumed by the same arrogance that had destroyed him. The photo hit every front page within an hour. Back at Horizon, Ethan saw the image appear on a breaking news alert. He turned his phone face down and exhaled slowly. Leah glanced at him. It's over, she said. Ethan shook his head. No, it's only beginning. He knew this wasn't just a collapse. It was a shift, the kind that rewrote how power would be defined in his industry from that day forward. That night, the Sterling mansion was silent. Ryan drank alone, scrolling through news articles that dissected his downfall in real time. Claire sat in the study, staring at her reflection in a darkened window. Victor sat in his office, surrounded by empty glasses and framed awards that now meant nothing. On his desk, the $100 bill lay unfolded, smooth and meaningless. He picked it up and turned it over in his fingers one last time before whispering to the empty room. It was just a drink, but deep down he knew it had never been about the wine. It was about the lesson he had refused to learn, that the cost of arrogance is always more than the price of humility. Outside, the media lights faded from the gates. Inside Horizon's tower, another light stayed on, Ethan's office window glowing softly against the dark city sky. He wasn't celebrating. He was planning. Because while one empire had fallen, another was rising, one built not on greed but on conscience, and soon the whole world would follow. 6 months passed, but the echoes of the Sterling collapse hadn't faded. If anything, they had reshaped the world that once worshipped their name. Across the skyline, the Sterling Tower still stood tall but hollow, stripped of its logo. New executives ran the company now under different principles, but the building itself felt haunted, a monument to everything arrogance could destroy. Meanwhile, Horizon Systems had become the model everyone else tried to imitate. Investors called it the conscience of technology. Universities began adding its ethical framework to their business programs. Ethan Cole had gone from a quiet innovator to an unlikely icon of integrity. That morning, sunlight filled Horizon's auditorium as Ethan addressed a global summit of business leaders. Screens behind him displayed charts, but his focus wasn't numbers, it was people. When we built this initiative, he said, we didn't do it to punish companies. We did it to rebuild trust. We proved that ethics and innovation aren't opposites, they're partners. Applause filled the room. Among the audience sat faces from every major corporation, including several from companies that had once dismissed Horizon as naive. They weren't dismissing it now. Horizon's model had improved employee satisfaction, doubled innovation output, and cut turnover across dozens of industries. Ethan clicked to the final slide, a line graph showing a rising curve labeled ethical performance. You can chase profit for a quarter, he said, or purpose for a generation. Only one of them lasts. The room stood in applause. Cameras flashed. But when it ended, Ethan didn't linger on the stage. He slipped away quietly back to his office overlooking the city that had once laughed at him. Leah followed him in, carrying a folder. Your next meeting's with the Education Initiative team, she said. Also, another 20 companies signed onto the framework this week. Ethan nodded. Good. Make sure the scholarships keep expanding too, especially for service workers, the people who make everyone else's success possible. Leah smiled. Already done. He turned toward the window, watching the city hum with life. Then we're doing something right. The door buzzed. Leah checked the intercom. Sir, someone's here without an appointment. She says her name is Claire Sterling. Ethan paused. For a moment, he said nothing. Then calmly, send her in. When Claire entered, she looked nothing like the woman who had once glided through ballrooms draped in designer confidence. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes plain, her makeup almost gone. But her eyes, steady, honest, were the first real thing about her Ethan had ever seen. Thank you for seeing me, she said quietly. Ethan gestured to the chair across from him. Please, she sat, hands folded tightly. I'm not here to defend what we did, she began. There's no defense for it. Ethan said nothing, just listened. Claire took a breath. After the collapse, my father retreated to what's left of our estate. He still believes it was all a conspiracy, that the world turned on him unfairly. Ryan left for Europe. He posts pictures pretending he's still rich. I couldn't do either. I had to face what we caused. Ethan studied her. And what did you find? Her voice trembled but didn't break. I found people we hurt, workers who lost jobs because of our greed, communities we poisoned. I've been volunteering with an organization that helps rebuild small companies destroyed by corporations like ours. She looked down, then back at him. I sold everything I had left, started a foundation for worker education and rights. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to learn how to do better. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. His expression softened slightly. What made you change? She met his gaze. You did. The night you said nothing in that ballroom when you could have humiliated us in return, you didn't. That silence said more than revenge ever could. Ethan leaned back. Redemption isn't words, Claire. It's consistency. Keep showing up, she nodded, eyes shining. I will. He rose, walked to the window, and spoke quietly. My father used to say true power isn't control, it's elevation. The strongest leaders create more leaders, not more followers. He turned back toward her. If you want to rebuild something, start there. Claire stood, a faint, grateful smile crossing her face. Thank you, she said. After she left, Ethan stood by the window a while longer, watching the traffic below move in steady streams of light. The city had changed. So had he. Later that afternoon, he stopped by a small coffee shop near Horizon headquarters. The same barista who'd once worked the gala served him, now wearing a college sweatshirt. Hey, Mr. Cole, the student said with a grin. Guess what? I'm graduating next year. Your scholarship paid for it, Ethan smiled, accepting the cup. Congratulations. You earned it, the barista laughed. They still talk about that night, you know. The waiter who changed everything. Ethan chuckled softly. I didn't change everything. I just reminded people who they could be. As he reached for his wallet, the barista waved him off. On the house today. Ethan set a bill on the counter anyway. Then this is for the next student. Value your work. Outside, he paused at a newsstand. A magazine cover caught his eye. His and his father's photo side by side under the headline, The Cole Legacy. How Integrity Rebuilt an Industry. He didn't stop to read it. He didn't need to. The real story wasn't written in headlines. It was written in every employee who now worked without fear, every student who now believed opportunity could exist without exploitation, and every company that realized success without humanity was failure in disguise. His phone buzzed, a message from his father. Character builds empires, cruelty destroys them. Ethan smiled faintly, pocketing the phone. He looked up at the skyline. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the old world were still trying to rebuild their power, but the ground had shifted forever. He started walking back toward Horizon's tower, the evening sun glinting off its glass walls. Behind him, the city moved with new rhythm, slower, steadier, kinder. He didn't look back. There was no need. The lesson had already been learned, and this time it would last. The night deepened, and the city glowed beneath a blanket of soft amber light. From his office high above the skyline, Ethan Cole watched the horizon shimmer, his reflection ghosting against the glass. The hum of the world below was steady now, quieter than it used to be, as if the chaos had finally learned how to breathe. Leah stepped inside, carrying a single envelope. "This just came in," she said. "No return address." Ethan took it, opening it carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten, neat, deliberate. The signature stopped him cold. Victor Sterling. He read in silence. "Ethan, you don't know what silence sounds like until the world stops returning your calls. I once believed power meant being untouchable. You taught me the truth, that power means nothing without respect. The company we built is gone, but what's left of me is trying to understand why. Maybe it's not too late to learn." There was no apology, not really, just the smallest admission of humanity buried beneath a lifetime of pride. Ethan folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. He didn't smile, didn't frown. He simply said, "At least he's listening." Leah lingered by the doorway. "Do you ever think about them? The Sterlings?" Ethan turned toward the skyline again. "Sometimes. Not with anger anymore. Just understanding. People think justice is about punishment. It isn't, it's about reflection. They finally have to live with who they are." He picked up his father's framed photo from the desk. Daniel Cole, smiling as he always had, steady, patient, proud. Ethan could still hear his voice saying, "Power reveals character, not creates it." He set the photo back down. "And I guess now it's revealing mine too." Later that week, Ethan stood at the Global Technology Forum in Geneva. The audience stretched endlessly before him. CEOs, scientists, policymakers. The event's theme was simple: the future of ethical innovation. When he spoke, the room fell silent. 6 months ago, he began, a scandal tore through our industry. But it wasn't about technology. It was about people. It showed us that progress built on exploitation collapses, but progress built on principle endures. Every system we design is a mirror of who we are. If it's corrupted, it's because we are. If it uplifts, it's because we've learned. He paused, letting the words settle. Integrity isn't a business strategy, he continued. It's survival. Without it, no empire lasts. The audience rose in applause. Cameras flashed, and for once Ethan allowed himself a smile, not for victory, but for peace. Across the world, broadcasts replayed the speech. Newspapers printed his words under bold headlines. Universities studied Horizon's framework as a blueprint for ethical enterprise. Investors called it the new gold standard. And in a quiet coastal house miles away, Victor Sterling watched from an old television. His hair was grayer, his voice slower, but as Ethan's speech played, something in his expression softened. He turned to Claire, who now worked with her foundation, and said, "He built what I never could. A legacy that can't be bought." Claire nodded. "Maybe we both learned, just differently." Victor stared at the fading screen and whispered, "Better late than never." Back in New York, Ethan stood by his window that night the same way he had so many nights before. The city looked alive again, its pulse lighter, its rhythm clean. Down below, he saw people leaving their offices laughing, free. He thought of the barista now in college, of the employees who no longer feared their bosses, of the engineers pushing boundaries with integrity at the core. This was what rebuilding looked like. Quiet. Real. Leah knocked once and entered softly. "The final numbers are in," she said, handing him a tablet. "The ethics initiative has expanded to 112 countries. It's bigger than we imagined." Ethan glanced at the screen, then turned it off. It was never about numbers. Then what was it about? She asked. He smiled faintly. About proving that decency can scale. The phone on his desk buzzed once. A message from his father's old number appeared, scheduled before Daniel's retirement. "You did what I hoped you would. Make the world pause long enough to remember its soul." Ethan let the words sink in. The weight of years carried in one line. Outside, the skyline stretched endlessly. The old towers of greed still stood, but now they shared space with something new. Structures of transparency, collaboration, conscience. As he turned off the lights, his reflection disappeared from the glass, leaving only the city and its 1,000 lights gleaming like quiet promises. He locked the office door and stepped into the hall, the sound of his footsteps blending with the heartbeat of the building he'd rebuilt, not as a fortress, but as a bridge. For the first time, he didn't feel like the boy who'd been humiliated or even the man who'd won. He felt like someone who had finally understood what his father meant all along. Power wasn't in wealth, or titles, or revenge. It was in restraint. It was in grace. It was in the choice to rise without crushing others. As the elevator descended, he took one last look through the glass walls at the city reborn by consequence and character. The night that had once mocked him now bowed quietly to his light. And in that silence, the story of Ethan Cole, the man who turned humiliation into humanity, finally reached its perfect end.